Hi, my name is Melissa Eder. I'm a librarian with the AC Libraries on the Washington Street campus, and I also teach psychology classes, which is one of the reasons why I'm making these videos. I have recorded these videos for my classes. I require my students to go over these two videos over chapters 1 and 2 from our lifespan textbook. You may or may not be required to watch these videos if you are not taking this class from me. I'm offering these videos to other instructors, so if you have questions about how these videos impact your grade or any other questions about how your class is being done, if I'm not your teacher, then please contact your instructor directly. That instructor may or may not choose to have the quiz questions that are inserted directly into these videos count toward grades. They might just be offering this to you for informational purposes only, or it could be that they've entered a column into the gradebook into Blackboard, and this will be worth at least a participation grade. Ask me, the librarian, if you have any questions about how to do citations, either for APA or MLA. And we're also here to help you, all students at Emerald College, anytime and every time you are required by any assignment or instructor to go out and find resources. Usually you have to go find 3 sources, reliable sources. That's what my job is, and all of us here in the library. So come find us physically. We're on the 4th floor of the Ware Student Commons on Washington Street campus. We also have a part-time librarian who sometimes is housed within the Northwest branch of the Amarillo Public Library. It's the building that's right next to Building A on our West campus of Amarillo College. You just have to go into the public library and then find the room that's dedicated to AC students. She can help you some afternoons, but always call us to find out where you can go for help. And our phone number is area code 806-371 5400 5400, or you can email us by sending an email to library-help@actx.edu. Good luck with this class, and be sure to ask your instructor if you do have any questions. Thanks. Okay, I've made 2 of these videos using a tool called VidGrid. These VidGrid videos cover the material from the first 2 chapters of our book. In these videos, I've included all of the information you will need for exam questions covering these chapters. Or at least that's the case if you're taking this class with me. If I'm not your instructor, please ask them for clarification. As you watch these, periodically the video will stop playing and you'll see a question pop up on your screen. You'll have to answer that question before you can move on. These questions are intended to make sure you're absorbing the information, and they're also good practice for the sort of questions you'll see on our exams. Watching these videos and answering the questions are required for my class. These 2 videos are your first 2 assignments due the first week of classes. I've also made outlines of both chapters for you. You might want to take notes on these outlines as you watch these videos. Or you can instead print out a copy of my handout. That's the PowerPoint lecture with 3 slides to a page and lines on the right for notes. Since I've provided you with these materials, that means that even if you're waiting on your book, you can still get started with this course. These 8-week courses move fast, so get started now, at least with the first 2 chapters. Oh, and all of the materials I'm talking about, the chapter outlines and the PowerPoint handouts, are all provided to you in our course in Blackboard. Just click on the menu item Lecture Notes to navigate to the chapter you're needing. And remember, if I'm not your instructor, some of what I just said might not be true for your class. Check with them for clarification. One more thing before I get started. This is my full lecture on Chapter 1, so it will be a long video. You don't have to finish it all at once, but if you do need to stop it and return to it later on, you'll have to answer all of the quiz questions that are inserted into the video again before it'll let you move past. So ideally, carve out a chunk of time to get through this thing in a session. This is our book for Lifespan Growth and Development. It's available both as a hardcover book or as a loose-leaf version, which you'll put into your own 3-ring binder. You can even get it as a digital ebook if you'd prefer. As long as you get this title, Lifespan Development Lives in Context by Tara L. Kuether, and make sure it's the 2nd edition, it doesn't matter what format you choose. The AC bookstore should have it, or try Amazon, Chegg, or any of these textbook vendors. You only need to get the book. You do not need an access code or access card. Chapter 1 is a review of the psychological theories that apply to lifespan psychology. Lifespan psychology, also called developmental psychology, is a subfield that follows human development from womb to tomb, or from conception until death. Here are the stages of human life. Development is multidimensional, which means it entails changes in many areas of development. Physical development refers to body maturation and growth, including body size, proportion, appearance, health, and perceptual abilities. Cognitive development is the maturation of thought processes and the tools that we use to obtain knowledge, become aware of the world around us, and solve problems. Socio-emotional development includes changes in personality, emotions, views of oneself, social skills, and interpersonal relationships with friends and family. Development is also multidirectional, consisting of both gains and losses, growth and decline, which periodically trade off throughout the lifespan. Development is plastic. In psychology, this word plastic means malleable or changeable. Unlike a metal, plastic can bend without breaking. Plasticity or neuroplasticity is used to describe the brain's ability to adapt, recovering from an injury or defect by rerouting processes and creating new neural pathways. Human beings, particularly the youngest of us, are remarkably resilient, able to overcome a lot of challenges. Development is influenced by context. Where and when did the person develop? How is that person's physical and social environment set up? What did the person's family, culture, country, or historical time period look like? How did all of that impact the person's development? You can probably appreciate the fact that a person's culture is particularly important to how they will develop. Cross-cultural research compares individuals and groups from different cultures to identify similarities and differences in developmental processes. Cultural research, a growing trend in the field of developmental science, examines how culture itself influences development. Cohorts are people who are born at the same time period. They share some similarities that might not be seen among people born at other times. Age-graded influences refer to changes that are largely tied to our chronological age and are predictable. We know about when kids will enter puberty, what the average age is. History-graded influences refer to things like wars that do not impact all generations. We can now claim the COVID pandemic as a history-graded influence that impacted all of us. Non-normative influences are unique to individuals. They are not normal in the sense that not everybody goes through these things. I actually survived a 100-year flash flood in Canyon, Texas in the 70s. Finally, development is multidisciplinary. The contributions of many fields or disciplines are needed to understand how people grow, think, and interact with their world. You will study psychological principles in numerous classes during your education, from speech class to biology. Development is both continuous, meaning it's slow and gradual, and also discontinuous, which is abrupt. In psychology, there are several stage theories which follow the discontinuous approach. A stage theory outlines something in stages, with stage 1 happening before stage 2 can occur. Individuals are active in how they interact with and influence the world around them, create the experiences that lead to developmental change, and thereby influence how they change over their lifespan. One of the oldest and perhaps most heated debates within the field of human development is the nature-nurture issue. Explanations that rely on nature point to inborn genetic endowments or heredity, maturational processes, and evolution as causes of developmental change. An alternative explanation for developmental change is nurture, the view that individuals are molded by the physical and social environment in which they are raised, including the home, school, workplace, neighborhood, and society at large. Although developmental scientists once attempted to determine whether nature or nurture influenced development, or at what percentage each of the two influenced something, most now agree that both nature and nurture, as well as the interactions between nature and nurture, are all important contributors to development across the lifespan. A theory is a way of organizing a set of observations or facts into a comprehensive explanation of how something works. Effective theories generate specific hypotheses, or proposed explanations for a given phenomenon that can be tested by research. So a theory is a broad idea, while a hypothesis is a testable specific component. A good theory is one that is falsifiable, or capable of generating hypotheses that can be tested and potentially refuted. Psychoanalytical theories describe development and behavior as a result of the interplay of inner drives, memories, and conflicts of which we are unaware and cannot control. Sigmund Freud, a Viennese physician, is credited as the father of the psychoanalytic perspective. He believed we progress through a series of psychosexual stages, periods in which unconscious drives are focused on different parts of the body, making stimulation to those parts a source of pleasure. Because of its heavy emphasis on infant sexuality, Freud's psychosexual stage framework is not widely accepted, but he contributed to the field in other ways. He identified the unconscious mind, and many believe, as he did, that early family experiences and our emotions shape us. Freud also inspired future psychologists, therapists, and researchers like Erik Erikson. Erikson was influenced by Freud, but he placed less emphasis on instinctual drives as motivators of development and instead focused on the role of the social world, society, and culture in shaping development. Erikson posed a lifespan theory of development in which individuals progress through 8 stages of psychosocial development, with each stage presenting a unique developmental task, a crisis or conflict. Erikson differed from Freud in that Freud believed that individuals could get stuck in a stage or fixate. Erikson believed that no crisis is ever fully resolved and that people revisit them throughout their lives. After Erikson's death, his wife published his work with an additional and final 9th stage, but it hasn't been adopted widely in the discipline, and in this class we will focus on the 8 stages. Erikson's psychosocial theory is well regarded as one of the first lifespan views of development. On these next 2 slides, you can see more detail regarding each of the stages of these 2 theories. Theorists who study behaviorism examine only behavior that can be observed and believe that all behavior is influenced by the physical and social environment. Classical conditioning is a form of learning in which the person or animal comes to associate environmental stimuli with physiological responses. Ivan Pavlov was instrumental in discovering the principles of classical conditioning while he was working with dogs. Classical conditioning applies to involuntary responses, unplanned emotional reactions, or physiological responses, but operant conditioning applies to voluntary intentional responses. B.F. Skinner's theory of operant conditioning maintains that behavior becomes more or less probable depending on its consequences. A reinforcement is a rewarding or pleasant outcome that increases the likelihood that a behavior will be repeated in the future. A punishment is an aversive or unpleasant outcome that decreases the chances of the behavior repeating. In Pavlov's research, he discovered that dogs would begin salivating even before their food was delivered, when they heard their bowls rattle or saw their trainer approaching at a certain time. He trained the dogs to associate a random stimulus, the sounding of a tone, with the arrival of their food, so that eventually the tone sounds as well as the food resulted in salivation. According to Bandura's social learning theory, people actively process information. They think and they feel emotion, and their thoughts and feelings influence their behavior. One of Bandura's most enduring ideas about development is that people learn through observing and imitating models, which he referred to as observational learning. Another of Bandura's contributions that has influenced the field of lifespan human development is the concept of reciprocal determinism, according to which individuals and the environment interact and influence each other. As an example of this, a shy person might avoid loud parties because they are intimidated by so many people. The choice to avoid parties affects the environments that the person will be in, which might intensify their shyness. The shy person is both impacted by their environment and in turn shapes their own environment by making choices. Jean Piaget was one of the first theorists to understand and study how different children's minds are from adults. Prior to him, children were often viewed as miniature adults, but Piaget discovered that their thinking is very different. He founded the cognitive developmental perspective on child development, which views people as active explorers of their world, learning by interacting with the world around them and organizing what they learn into cognitive schemas, which are concepts, ideas, and ways of interacting with the world. Piaget proposed that children's drive to explore and understand the world propels them through 4 stages of cognitive development. His cognitive developmental theory transformed the field of developmental psychology and remains one of the most widely cited developmental theories today, even across disciplines like education and healthcare. Here are Piaget's stages of cognitive development. Information processing theory posits that the mind works in ways similar to a computer because information enters, is manipulated, stored, recalled, and used to solve problems. We use some of the same vocabulary words for this theory and for computer science, such as save, recall, memory, and storage. Information processing theory is not just one theory. Rather, there are many theories that emphasize different aspects of thinking. Maturation of the brain and nervous system, as well as experience and interaction, contribute to how well people are able to think and process information. This approach offers a complex and detailed view of how people think. Contextual theories emphasize the role of the socio-cultural context in development. Vygotsky's Socio-Cultural Theory examines how culture is transmitted from one generation to the next through social interaction. Children interact with adults and more experienced peers as they talk, play, and work alongside them. Language is an important tool, enabling people to grow and develop further. Vygotsky's Socio-Cultural Theory was the first theory to emphasize the role of the cultural context in influencing people's development throughout life. Another contextual theory, Bronfenbrenner's Bioecological Systems Theory, poses that development is a result of the ongoing interactions among biological, cognitive, and psychological changes within the person and their changing context. The individual interacts with the contexts in which they are embedded, influencing and being influenced by those interactions and contexts. The microsystem consists of the person's immediate physical and social environment. The mesosystem includes the relations and interactions among microsystems. The exosystem consists of settings in which the individual is not a participant, but that nevertheless influence them. The macrosystem is the larger socio-cultural context. The chronosystem extends across all of the other systems and refers to the timing of events. As people's roles change over time, with events like graduation, marriage, parenthood, their microsystems shift and change as well. Ethological theory is a precursor to evolutionary developmental theory and is the scientific study of the evolutionary basis of behavior and its survival value. Charles Darwin inspired this theory. Researchers like Lawrence and Tinbergen observed animals and noticed instinctual responses, such as imprinting, when an animal like a duck will immediately bond with the first moving thing they see, ideally their mother, who will help ensure their survival. In his research on humans, Bowlby identified releasers, or behaviors of newborns that elicit nurturing responses from caregivers, such as crying, smiling, and grasping. Evolutionary developmental theory applies principles of evolution and scientific knowledge about the interactive influence of genetic and environmental mechanisms to understand the changes people undergo throughout their lifetime. The complex interaction of genes with the environment can result in significant developmental outcomes. In crocodiles, for example, the sex of the crocodile is determined by the temperature while the egg is developing. Applied developmental science is the study of individuals within the contexts in which they live. In all research disciplines, following the scientific method is a standard practice. This method outlines the basic steps used in formulating questions, finding answers, and communicating research discoveries. The basic steps are: 1. Identify the research question or problem to be studied and formulate the hypothesis or proposed explanation to be tested. 2. Gather information to address the research question. 3. Use statistical analysis to summarize the information gathered and determine whether the hypothesis is refuted or shown to be false. And finally, 4. Interpret the summarized information, consider the findings in light of prior research studies, and share findings with the scientific community and world at large. It is not an easy, simple process, and often unexpected findings can lead to additional research. Replication, or repeating the experiment, often in a different location and conducted by a different research team, is a key part of the scientific method, since it can illuminate flaws in the original study's design or lend support to the hypothesis when results are similar to the original study. Scientists use the term data to refer to the information they collect when they conduct research. There are different ways to gather data. The first we will review are called observational measures. Scientists who use naturalistic observation observe and record behavior in natural, real-world settings. This approach is challenging because one must first decide on an operational definition of the behavior of interest. Sometimes the presence of an observer causes the observed person to behave in unnatural ways, or ways that are not typical for them, a phenomenon called participant reactivity. Structured observations entail observing and recording behaviors displayed in a controlled environment, a situation constructed by the experimenter. Often this is in a laboratory. Self-report measures include interviews and questionnaires. The open-ended interview is very flexible because the trained interviewer uses a conversational style that encourages the participant or the person under study to expand their responses. Structured interviews pose the same set of questions to each participant in the same way, and therefore are less flexible than open-ended interviews. Questionnaires, also called surveys, are sets of questions, typically multiple choice, that scientists compile and use to collect data from large samples of people. Frequently, questionnaires are anonymous, which protects respondents' privacy and might encourage their honesty. Physiological measures, such as measuring heart rate, perspiration, dilation of pupils, and cortisol levels, are increasingly used in developmental research because cognition, emotion, and behavior have physiological indicators, or actual changes to the body and functioning. An advantage is that these measures do not rely on verbal reports and generally cannot be faked. A challenge is that the recorded measures may be difficult to interpret. Measuring brain activity is a particularly promising source of data. There are different techniques of conducting research or different research designs. A case study is an in-depth examination of a single person or small group of individuals. Sometimes this is the only way to learn about something rare, and it can lead to ideas for further research, but findings cannot always be extended out or generalized to other people. Correlational research permits researchers to examine relations among measured characteristics, behaviors, and events. It is important to note that correlational research does not establish cause. It is not clear if one variable causes another, only that the two variables are related to one another in some way. Experiments are conducted to determine causal relationships among variables or factors. The dependent variable is the behavior under study. The independent variable is the factor proposed to change the behavior. It is manipulated or varied systematically by the researcher during the experiment. Random assignment, where each participant has an equal chance of being assigned to either the experimental group, which receives the intervention, or the control group, which does not receive the intervention, is essential for ensuring that the groups are equal in all pre-existing characteristics. Control groups are necessary in experimental design because if the participants in the control group do not exhibit changes, but those in the experimental group do, the researcher is better able to conclude that it was in fact the independent variable that was affecting change. Developmental research designs are used to study the changes that occur over the lifespan and include the cross-sectional research design, longitudinal research design, and sequential research design. Cross-sectional research studies compare groups of people at different ages at one point in time. Researchers are able to compare the different age groups, however, they cannot draw conclusions about how the individual participants might change over time. In contrast, longitudinal studies track the same group of people over time, acquiring data on the participants at several points in time across the duration of the study, which may run for a few years up to 30 years or more. Longitudinal studies only look at one cohort, or a group of people who are all the same age. The sequential research design attempts to address the limitations of the previous two designs by combining aspects of both, following groups of people of different ages, multiple cohorts, at several time points over the duration of the study. There are 5 basic ethical principles that guide the work of researchers. 1. Beneficence and non-malfeasance. 2. Responsibility. 3. Integrity. 4. Justice. And 5. Respect for autonomy. The first refers to the responsibility to do good and avoid harm. The second principle requires researchers to clarify their obligations and roles and avoid conflicts of interest. They must also report their findings to the world at large and correct any misinterpretations of those findings. Integrity requires accuracy, honesty, and truthfulness as researchers keep the promises they make. Justice refers to ensuring that the benefits and risks to research participants are spread across the individuals and groups. In other words, one participant or one study group should not receive all of the benefits or accept all of the risks inherent in the study. Because of this principle, members of the control group are often given the option of receiving the intervention later on. Autonomy refers to the fact that research participants have rights and should be allowed to exercise their choices. Informed consent is one way that autonomy is preserved. Researchers explain the purpose and procedures of their study, the benefits and risks to participation, and ensure that participants who agree to participate are able to make that decision and are not compromised or pressured in some way. Their rights must be protected. and participants are informed that they can choose to discontinue the research at any time. Assent can be obtained from minor children who cannot legally provide consent, which is given by their legal guardians, but can still have some say in their participation by choosing to sign or not sign an assent document. That's it for Chapter 1's VidGrid video. Please let me know if you have any questions, whether I'm your instructor for this class or simply because I work in the AC library. I've also made another video on Chapter 2. If you're taking this class with a different instructor, please contact that person for more guidance on the requirements in your class. That second video is also required for my class.